Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another Tech Educators Career Talk. And the thing I love about these, and the thing I think is really great, is that we get to hear such a wide range of voices from the tech industry, and get the opportunity to really talk about. Oh, I've got it going out of my other thing here, which is not great. I don't know how to turn that down, so I'm gonna have to have someone who's far more technically minded than me turn down a monitor that isn't mine, which is going to be interesting. We'll see how that goes. Turn that monitor off. It's not. It's my phone. I told you it's technical stuff. We're joined today. So sorry, everyone. Technically brilliant. We did all the testing earlier. We're joined today by Elle Overvoorde, who's going to talk to us about the next right thing. And I don't want to do your introduction, Elle. So um, I will hand over in just a second. I just wanted everyone to know, though, before I do that, that we want to make this an interactive session as possible. If you have questions, please pop them in chat, and I'll try and moderate and dive in at the best times. And Elle, if that's okay with you, that's how we go ahead. So without further ado, I will hand over to Elle. Great. Yeah. Yeah.
Can everyone hear now? Still not.
Is that there's luck involved in this, and there's always luck involved in things. But I thought I'd start by talking to you a little bit about how you can make yourself a bit luckier. And I think a lot of that is based on the organization that you select. So the first piece of very material advice that I would give to anyone who is looking to change careers is to find somewhere with a really good cultural fit for you. And so what I mean by that is find somewhere where you have a reason to be there at work. So you kind of get out of bed and you say, yeah, okay, what I'm doing, it doesn't have to be like a higher calling, but I'm relatively on board with what we're doing. It's particularly is that it gives you a bit more room to breathe. So if you're trying to find the next right thing and you're kind of experimenting with job roles, you can sit in a place where you're like, I'm not super enthused with where I currently am. You can sit there for a little bit longer if the people around you are good. So it gives you a bit more time to figure out what it is that's going to make you kind of interested, or what your next move needs to be. Um, the next thing that I would say is you will do much better if you can find a company that is growing. And that is a little bit harder in the current economic climate than many people would wish. But I think what you need is if you can find a company that's growing, and there are lists that people publish, so you can Google it, or you can also go and have a look at where the venture capitalism money is going. Is helpful because it helps you to do those thought experiments where you're saying, oh, well, they're hiring someone to do X. Maybe that could work for me. The next thing I would say that can help make you a little bit luckier is growth mindset. So you've probably heard of this concept before, but if you haven't, it is this concept that essentially anything you need to learn, you can learn. So if you were to distill it in one sentence, is I can't do that yet. But you don't believe that talent is innate or that abilities are kind of something that you're born with. You just look at situations and say, I don't think that's something I can do now, but I could learn to do it. And I think that is super important in terms of just looking at the situation that you're in, even if it's not particularly favorable, looking at what you could do to either improve the situation, improve your position in it, or to move yourself somewhere else, right? Like sometimes growth mindset gets weaponized a little bit in corporate speak, and you say like, okay, well, something really terrible has happened in your organization, but you have a growth mindset, you can stay here. You can always go somewhere else, right? And then the final thing, which is kind of the meat of my talk, is identifying your next right thing. And so I have a device that we can use for this, which is called imaginary hindsight. And so if you haven't heard of this concept before, it's a thought exercise. It takes 21 minutes. So if you're looking to change career and you can afford 21 minutes, I would thoroughly recommend this. So all you're doing is thinking about your present reality. So you spend 7 minutes making a list of, here are all the things in my present reality. And that can be things that frustrate you, things that you don't want to be happening to you anymore, things that you dislike, everything around your present reality that's kind of dissatisfying. And then the next step is to spend 7 minutes listing your desired future. And that's often the opposite of whatever is happening to you now, right? If you're in a very uncertain situation, you might be like, I would like some certainty. And so you spend 7 minutes figuring out what better looks like. And that can be in, it doesn't really have a specific time horizon, but like in 2 years or whatever. And then the final part of the exercise is to spend 7 minutes thinking about the next right thing you can do to move you from where you are today to where you want to be. And it sounds really, really simplistic, but I found this exercise really, really helpful just when you're trying to figure out what steps you are capable of taking today. It doesn't have to be a whole plan. It doesn't have to be a 5-year plan, because in product management, we have this concept of humble planning, which is really, really useful. There is a planning trap, particularly in technology, where because tech teams are expensive, we say, right, we need to know exactly what we're doing for the next year. We're going to do these 5 projects. And we're going to think really carefully about how we're going to allocate our resources, and this is what it's going to look like. Then what happens is you start the first project, it's way more complicated than you thought, everything goes wrong, project 2 becomes late, project 3 doesn't exist anymore, and before the end of it, it's all unraveled, right? And if you're looking at that situation incorrectly, you look at it the following year and you say, right, we need to spend even more time planning. We need to really put some effort in this time because it all went wrong last year. Where actually, if you look at that situation, it's not possible to plan because there's too many unknowns. So what you say is, okay, I know that I'm going to do project 1. And then I'll be able to give you way more of an estimate about what project 1 looks like once we've done a bit of discovery and we feel a bit more confident. And then, and then we'll think about project 2 next. As long as these things are in a priority, it'll be fine. So yeah, it's a concept of humble planning. So you don't do all of your planning up front. You add to your plan as you get more information, and it's much more efficient. So anyway, that's humble planning. I will give you here is my example. So when I started at the beginning of my career, this is what my present reality looked like. So I had just finished university. I desperately wanted to be an actor. And I just didn't really know what I was doing. And so I was kind of doing the odd acting job. You can see me as a dead robot in Humans at some point. I wasn't very successful. But what I knew is I really hated all the kind of traveling around and uncertainty that I had in my world. It didn't really suit me. I'm quite I like a routine. I like to be quite a settled person. That wasn't working for me at all. And I had no idea what I was good at. I had some really, I graduated with an English degree, and I minored in script writing. And so I didn't really know what I was good at. I didn't really have it wasn't a kind of graduate with a particular career in mind. I had friends that had done medicine or whatever, and they knew what they were doing, and I had no idea. So instead, I looked towards my desired future, and I was like, right, well, I want to find joy in my work, which is why acting seemed important to me, because I love it. But I also want time for my friends and my hobbies, and I need some sort of sense of steadiness. I need a steady income. That's important to me. And so when you start thinking about your pathways and your steps, you'll say like, wow, there kind of isn't really a steady income around acting. That doesn't exist. And so you need to start thinking about something else. And so when I was thinking about steps that I could take, I was like, okay, well, an office job wouldn't be terrible, because if I could find something flexible enough that I could audition around it, that'd be pretty good. And I want to look for something that minimizes my travel time. So I've got lots of time for my friends and my hobbies. But like suddenly, those are 2 very actionable things. Like office jobs exist. We could probably go and get one. and so it was a way to get hold of what we were going to do next. So yeah, if you kind of look at my career through that lens, so I was fixing the problem of, okay, I don't have any stability in my life by, okay, well, I can try out stability with a temporary contract. What do we think? And so I was like, I've got a good cultural fit here. I've got a bit of time for auditioning still. This is all right. Okay, let's stay. Let's see what we can do to stay. And what I could do to stay was, okay, we'll do some outbound customer services because that's what's on offer. And because I had that cultural fit, I was like, that's what's on offer. That kind of works for me. That's not a problem. Then I started thinking, oh yeah, go.
A reason why there was that set amount of time for each thing? Is that
Is there a reason
there
it's
like
7 minutes?
was that thing like has there been like research into it? Is it like the way that you broke down each time element? Is there research into that, or is it just to keep you honest on how you're breaking down what you wanted to do and where you wanted to go and stuff?
Sorry, is that about the exercise, i.e. 7 minutes for each thing, or is that
Yes,
for?
yeah, yeah. Is it
Yeah,
just like that keeps you honest, that keeps you on it, or is
I
it
think
like
it I think it stops you really kind of vacillating about it. I think like when you're talking about kind of frustration and happiness, you're in quite an emotional place. You're not
yeah,
looking for like, here is an itemized logical list of everything. You're kind of looking for your thoughts and feelings. And I think you should be able to get there in 7 minutes rather than making this a like huge document
yeah?
of,
I just
yeah, I think like keeping it light can actually be quite helpful.
And I think that there's really something to be said about that as well, isn't there? Because it's kind of like you could spend so long and get yourself in. It's those things that are right at the surface that are probably the most relevant and the most important.
Yes. And I think like most people know why they're unhappy, I think.
Yeah,
And like you might have to dig a bit. So sometimes you're like, oh, I feel really sad today. And then you have to ask yourself, well, why do I feel sad?
yeah,
But it doesn't take too long to access the thing that's really upsetting you. Or so I think it's, yeah, keeping it light at 7 minutes. You can obviously spend longer on it if you want to, but I think
yeah.
it's not necessary if you should be able to get
And like
most
you
of the way
said, if
there.
you're doing those 3 areas at 7 minutes each, it's like that's 21 minutes in your day.
Yeah,
And it's like it's something that if you can't find 21 minutes in your day to do that, then you can find it tomorrow definitely. But I'm sure everybody could. I really like that approach. Yeah.
yeah. And that exercise is something I come back to. Um, and that's kind of what I was. That was a great question, by the way. Thank you. And that's kind of what I was doing here, where so each time, like I'm a person who like once I'd found this kind of stability of a kind of day job, I was like, oh, I actually quite like a bit of change every now and again. This is all right. And so every time you kind of got into a new role or something, you've got a bit of settling down, and then you kind of feel a little bit like you kind of got your feet under the table, and then you go like, okay, right, how is this? If I do that exercise again, how is this serving me? So when I was looking at outbound customer services, I was like, oh, okay, talking to people is pretty good. It's better than writing emails. I find it more interesting. It's less hard work to me. Um, so when a permanent job comes up, because I was like, okay, well, I think this company is good for me, actually. I don't see a reason I need to leave in order to get to my imagined future yet. So let's stay. Um, then a sales job comes up, and you're like, okay, yeah, sales feels good. I'm now permanent. That's a step forwards. Um, I have then you kind of get to experience like, okay, well, I've now got targets, right? I've now got kind of more pressure. How do I feel about pressure? And then you're like, okay, pressure's fine. Um, but the hours crept as part of sales. When you start, like, it's useful to work evenings and weekends if you're trying to sell to people, because that's when they're available to talk to you. So that suited me less. And so I started looking for a way out of sales. Um, and kind of this point in my career is where things started to get interesting, because I was looking for something. So found once I'd found like a place that I was happy, I was kind of looking to do something more meaningful there, where I was like, okay, I want to be a part of strategy. I want to do decisions. And I was still very early in my career to be thinking about that kind of thing, but that's what I wanted. And I was green enough to think that I could. And so when I was doing this kind of, like basically this was all kind of just data entry. It wasn't particularly interesting, but it meant that you were working on something that was kind of intellectually stimulating. And so I was like, okay,
And
intellectually
there's a
stimulating is
question
important.
just on that. Sorry to interrupt,
Mm,
but
no.
and I think these 2 points are linked. Um, one, how do you find yourself making those constant moves? And I'm a great believer that actually there is no career now that lasts a whole. Careers used to be 40 years long. They're not 40 years long anymore. But how did you manage? I know you've obviously talked about temporary, then into sales, and then like how did you orchestrate those moves? Is one of the questions, and it's kind of linked to the next question that says like, and I don't know if the answer is going to be linked, but what made you stay at Naked Wines rather than searching other options and companies elsewhere? And I imagine they might be linked, but sorry, I'm kind of answering.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong, like at each kind of inflection point, there is a am I still serving myself by staying in the same place question. Um, and actually, I think uh, on this, like, once I had taken over on beer and I started, that it was at that point where I was like, okay, I like doing stuff. I like having a project. There are loads of places I could have a project. Maybe it's time that I move on because all of my experience is in one place. And that's when I started having conversations with a manager, and this is pre-COVID. And so I was like, like maybe this is going to involve like moving somewhere else in the country because that's how jobs used to work. Um, and so I was kind of at this inflection point where I was like, but that's when I looked at my imagined future, and that was like, I still want to have time for friends and hobbies,
Mm,
so I don't massively want to uproot myself. So what else could I do in this pathway?
yeah,
I was like, actually, I could study, couldn't I? Because what I need is experience of other companies. I don't really want to leave, but I can
yeah,
get experience from other companies by studying.
yeah,
Um, and so that was like, there was a decision there, but that was the decision that I took because that was an option that was open to me. And so I could get a step forwards without taking as big of a risk,
yeah.
because the risk of starting studying, you like, I don't like it, and then you stop.
Did you
It's
perceive
fine.
through each of the career roles as well? Did you perceive risk in moving? Did you perceive risk in, or or was that risk so relatively small that it was like I have to move because the risk is being unhappy?
It felt relatively small, and I think it was because that's something to be said for being at a high growth company, is
Mm,
that if you find yourself you take the opportunity and you hate it, it's potentially possible to go backwards. I never had to try it, but you have a good relationship with the people around you, and you can say, actually, I think I've made a mistake here. um, and so I think it also was kind of like, as someone who is attempting, I run a lot of experiments, like A/B tests and stuff. If you can hold your variables constant, as many
yeah.
variables as you can, you're only testing one thing. And so I was holding a company as a constant variable and then testing the jobs.
It's just like
That's kind
GCSE
of how I thought
science all
about
over
it.
again.
Yes, yeah. It had to be useful for something, right? But that was another one of the reasons that I was like, actually being in the same place is sort of helpful. Um, and it means you don't have to. I think one of the things that's very scary about changing role at the same time as you change company is that you've got all of the kind of new people, new way of doing stuff. Where's the water cooler type stuff occupying your brain at the same time as potential imposter syndrome, because you've changed careers and you're like, you've got two sets of change to navigate.
Yeah.
Um, not to say that it's not doable. It's just that if you don't have to, it's not, it's interesting to see if you can get yourself in a situation that means you've got a bit more of a safety net.
And I think that there's something really to be said about that as well. Because one of the things that we say to students all the time is like, think about the company that you want to be at and the opportunities. Don't think about the exact role you want, because companies want to promote internally because, like you said, you know where the water cooler is. Do you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
like that tacit knowledge that, and I think a lot of times we do sort of say, I want to work at that company, I want to do this exact role. Yeah, your journey has been a perfect example of like, find somewhere where you're comfortable and do those changes. And I think that there's, if any student is listening or anyone's listening now and thinking, even I don't know what to do, it's like you can go into a place that is exciting for you as an organization and then try and experiment. And it does happen. This is a perfect, sorry, I keep interrupting this slide. I think it's really relevant. So I'll let you finish because I think there's going to be a bit more of that. But I think it's just such a great demonstrator of that philosophy.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think um, when it was kind of at the moment where I started working with tech, where I felt like I'd found my place. So and my sister is a back end developer, and we're very close. And we used to talk a lot about how she's like, just people don't get it, and it makes it really hard to do my job. And she's really smart, and she just needed, like, it was a need that I could fill. And I felt really useful and helpful, and like I'm an absolute sucker for efficiency, just things working really nicely, like this kind of state of flow. And it meant that I was kind of captain of a state of flow, and that really really appealed to me. And suddenly I definitely found that I was in the right place. And so like I am confident now that my future is in product. I can't see myself doing anything else.
Oh, wow.
But it took a long wobble to get there. And I tried lots of different things. And I think if you'd asked me at any given point, I'd be like, no, I'm confident it's this. And I think that's fine. I think we are sometimes a bit too keen to impress our younger selves. I think that's a real. Sometimes people ask you it as a kind of gotcha, to be like, what do you think your like 12-year-old self would think of what you were doing now? My response is generally like, I was 12. I didn't really know very much. I don't tend to take the opinions of 12-year-olds, even if they're myself.
Yeah.
And so it's fine to evolve and to change and to grow and to be a different person now than you were 5 years ago. I think like we don't talk about that enough.
And also like the constant myth of everyone knew that A to B was how they got there. Like no one goes A to B,
Yeah.
And I think that that's again that's a great thing. I like to talk about the fact I think one of the best roles I ever had was working in KFC, because you would meet everybody from every part of society. It's like, would you say that that was on my career journey to get where you are now? No, but the skills and the things that you learn along the way, like that's the journey, that's the point, and
Yeah.
that's what I love about how you've laid this slide out as well. It's just like it's not a straight line progression to where I found myself and what I want to be. It's janky, and yeah, it does that.
Yeah. I think this is my favorite
Oh,
slide,
sorry.
right? Where I don't think because I have a background in script writing, I talk a lot about story structure. And there is this real temptation, particularly when you are reading the stories of billionaires or really successful people, is they try and fall into this a story structure that you would recognize from a film or a book, where they lean into this, like, humble beginnings, and then I found what I wanted to do, and then I launched myself to it, and I've never done anything wrong ever, and it's been brilliant, because that makes a really great story. It makes a really great autobiography. It makes a lovely TED talk. But what you want to try and listen to is the like wiggly stories of your actual peers who have kind of found their way by stepping forwards and stepping back and stepping sideways and asking people and retraining. And this is much, much more common, the kind of picture on the right. And I think part of the skill of it is it's basically a game of warmer, colder. If you used to play that as a child, you take a step in a direction and then you kind of feel it out and you think, okay, actually, I need to step away from this thing that I don't enjoy and more towards this thing that I do enjoy. And you kind of have to live it, I think. I had a really interesting question from someone I mentor where they asked me, like, what advice do you have for your younger self? And I was like, honestly, my younger self didn't listen to advice. And if you tell me I can't do something, I absolutely will try. And so, like, it's the learned experience that you can't necessarily bypass or jump over, because you'll always wonder if you're as stubborn as I am, at least. But yeah, I think one of the really important things is deciding what you're not going to do. And that's where that imagined future comes in as a check. So I am particularly susceptible to, like, if something is hard, I'm quite interested in doing it. It's probably why I work in tech, because someone was like, oh, you don't get many women in tech. I was like, oh, don't you? And so I work in tech. But deciding what you're not going to do with an eye on the imagined future. So things like, occasionally, like, a recruiter will reach out to you and be like, how would you feel about relocating to Abu Dhabi to do this job? And like, the kind of, that would be really hard and interesting part of my brain gets excited. But then the logical part of my brain that's done the exercise is like, I don't think you actually do want to do that.
Do you think that people in tech are sort of naturally predispositioned to doing that as well, though? Because it's kind of like we wanna explore, we want to understand, we want to find that out. But you're right, there's got to be a point where I kind of liken that to the million projects. Everyone's got a million projects open with none of them finished because we kind of want to dabble and explore and try new things out. But yeah, you're
Yeah,
right, deciding what not to do and saying no, I'm either going to finish that other project, but at least not open another new project. That is a
yeah,
constant sliding scale, isn't it?
yeah. And that's very much like one of the hardest things in tech is deciding what you're not going to do. It is very, very easy to run a tech team where somebody comes to you with an idea and you say, yeah, of course, I'm sure we've got another person who can have a little look at that. It is extremely hard to run an efficient and happy tech team that isn't focused on, like, one thing per team, basically. Like, occasionally two, but definitely not five. And so, like, deciding what you're not going to do is the real skill, I would say. I wanted to leave you with three more things before I go. And they are kind of bite-sized bits of advice that I think will help when you're looking to make changes. The first one is comparison is the thief of joy. And that is that if you compare yourself to other people, you will make yourself less happy, basically. If you start saying, well, so and so's younger than I used to be obsessed with trying to get on 30 under 30 lists. And I don't know why now on reflection, but I was really obsessed with, like, can I be better than these other people? Am I doing a better job than this person or this person? And it doesn't serve you because your circumstances are so different. So you may as well do the best job of doing what you're doing as you can. The other one that is really pertinent when you're changing careers is you can name your price. And so this comes from a mentee that I had, and she was in a position where she was trying to change her career to being a product manager, and she had two job offers on the table. One of them was a product manager, and one of them was the same thing that she was currently doing. And one of them was obviously safer than the other because she could continue doing what she was doing, or she could do the career change. And she was talking to me, and she was like, "Oh, I just, I need to figure out what salary I'm going to ask for on both of these." Um, and she was like, "And I can't think of a number." I was like, "Well, why do you need one number? Because actually, if they want to pay you a great deal to do the thing that you already know that you're good at, but you don't really like, so that you can spend that on career coaching and training courses, and like you can take other steps towards, you could be there for a year while it financed your career change essentially, or you could do it for 4 days a week and do the fifth day where you did some consulting or did an apprenticeship, or like it would give you options. If the salary was high enough, it would give you options. And this other job where this is the career that you really want, but you're worried if you pitch yourself at too expensive, they'll go with somebody else who's got more experience. It would be fine to pitch yourself as less expensive because it gives you the step forwards, right? And so that was a kind of real aha moment for her, where she was like, oh, okay, nowhere is it written that if I'm looking for X salary, I have to say the same thing to all jobs. And that's the same for like industries that you want to be in more. You can make yourself cheaper for an industry that is more desirable to you, and more expensive for an industry that's less desirable.
On that,
Yeah,
what would you say to sort of, because I think, and that's especially as you move around your career, that's going to be more and more relevant. On a first role, um, what would you say about that? Is still holds true, right? Like, because I think a lot of people come into tech and they sort of go, I want to be on 30,000 as a junior developer, and it's like, that's cool. You can apply those, right, to the companies as well. I think that's sort of the point I wanted to pull from that really is a small company where you're going to be sat next to a senior, but they can only afford to pay you 21, comparative to a big corporate that you might be part of a team, but you don't get any one-to-one, or the vice versa, but they pay you 28. Like, I think that the wider thing for that is you can take into consideration all aspects of a job when you're applying, and your price can also be dependent on those variables, right? Especially when you're coming into the role. So I'm just
yeah,
trying.
100%.
Yeah. Sorry, I was
Yeah,
just like that's the takeaway for me. It's like because not every job is everyone has like a salary band of like junior developer, mid developer. There's like not every job is the same by a long stretch, and I think that there's a lot of learnings in that about how when you're thinking about culture and the place you're going to work, how happy would I be? How much support am I going to get? Exactly what we said about training, downtime to work on your own projects and stuff like that is really important. Sorry.
yeah. No, that's great. That's a really great build. And I think, yeah, considering everyone's got like a, a, a floor below which they cannot go, right? Below which I cannot pay my rent. And that's
Right.
that's something you need to consider. But yeah, if you're considering whether you can do something that's slightly unpleasant for a little while in order to get closer, like it's things you can ask yourself and things you can use that imagined future as a test for.
I do like someone in the chat said, surely you just go for the most expensive, then they can negotiate you down. That is a strategy. That is a strategy.
It is a strategy.
Uh,
And the only caveat to that I would have is sometimes employers are sort of too respectful, and that they'll say like, this person wants 30, that must be what they want. I wouldn't talk, like they wouldn't say yes to 25, so I won't ask.
that's a
um
really good point, actually. Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. Yeah.
but it is fine to say something like, yeah, I'll have the top of the band, but if you need to negotiate on that, then I'm open to it. And it weakens your negotiation position to a degree, but also it makes sure you're in the room for the conversation, which can be really important.
Yeah, because that also gives you the opportunity to explore those other elements. you know, it might be, hey, it's 25, but raising to, yeah, exactly what you said, being in the room. Yeah.
Yeah, there is a really brilliant book that I've read. It was when I was doing some buying as part of my beer job, and I was really struggling with negotiation because I didn't like the kind of dance of it where people say, like, they say 10% higher than they mean so that you can say 10% lower than you mean so that they can think they won and you can think you won. And like, this all seemed nuts to me.
Yeah, right.
There's a book there's a book called Getting to Yes. I don't remember the author, I'm sorry, but it it has some really great things to say about negotiation. I'd really recommend it, particularly if negotiating salary is something that you find quite hard. I used to find it really difficult. I used to find it very easy to do it on other people's behalves and very difficult to do it for myself.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
And yeah, and I think if you do find it difficult, the approach I've always gone with, because I agree as well, is just like, just say what you're thinking.
yeah,
If you're honest, be like, look, I really need, say this is going around that 30, so I really need 30, that's where I'm at. But I could make it work for 25 on these caveats. And I
yeah,
would, and I want a clear pathway to 30. And I think sometimes just, yeah, I imagine there's probably a lot of people who've done a lot of talks about negotiating salaries because it's hard work, it's hard, and negotiation full stop is difficult.
yeah, yeah. And it's the thing that I found very difficult is it like some schools of negotiation require you to kind of put on this persona
Right.
that this kind of very bullish persona that I didn't really have. Um, so yeah, that's where I'd recommend Getting to Yes, because it kind of talks about, basically it talks about you and the person you're negotiating with as two experts evaluating a thing. And so in this case, it would be a job. So you'd say like, okay, well, the market rate is this. I can see you're offering these benefits, which I can see are probably, they're probably worth about 3 grand or so. Um, like I feel like there is still a gap here, or I feel like I could go and work at this other place where I've got an offer. I would prefer to work for you. So what can you do on the salary? So you're then
Interesting.
you're not trying to belittle anyone. You're not trying to like beat them down. You're just two experts talking about something you both know about. And it becomes a lot easier.
One of the questions in chat, just very quickly, is you mentioned that you got into tech because there aren't many women in tech. And at that point, what resources did you find helpful to help you in your career?
Um, Honestly, one of my biggest resources was our QA, our head of QA was a woman, and I did a little bit of QA as part of a project. Basically, the beer project I was running, um, we got it to a proposal, and we needed the CEO to sign off on it, and he was very very busy, and so we essentially stalled for like 2 months. And in that 2 months, there was a big tech change going out, and I got kind of seconded to come and do some QA. And it was about having a role model, because she she saw me walk into the room and she sat me down, she introduced me to everyone, and she like really took care of me and took the time to explain things and took the time to teach me that I can ask questions, and that, because it's quite an intimidating place, like there is quite a hefty divide between tech and product and the rest of the business at most companies,
Mm.
where those two things feel quite separate. um, and so I would say, like, finding yourself a mentor, someone you can talk to, someone who is like advocating for your career, either in the company or outside, either will do. Um, just someone who you can talk things through with, who will understand where you're coming from, I think is probably one of the best things you can do. Um, that and just finding great, I learn really well from like kind of things that come into my inbox on a weekly basis. There's quite a lot of really good um, product newsletters around. So things like Hustle Badger is great. Um, and there's some really good UX case studies as well that you can get emailed directly to you. And just like little bite-sized bits of learning, I find that really helps, um, just to kind of get you grounded, particularly if you're in a new area.
I think one of the things as well about
Um,
mentoring is I think a lot of people like to really think that the approach to mentoring is like you must formally go to someone and be like, I assign you my mentor. Please, will you mentor me? And it's like there's like some sort of ordination or something that happens. But actually, you don't like, I don't think people generally in career have like an official mentor, but what you do is you cultivate a network of trusted people that you can just ask. And I think,
Yeah,
um, Norwich and Norfolk, especially just off the top of my head, so you got like women in tech, you've got develop her, events and meetups. And I think one of the things is find meetup groups in your area that are tech based, and just find and build and nurture that community. And if someone you think can help you, you don't need to make it sort of a, will you officially mentor me? It's just a, what do you think about this? Because you can probably
yeah,
ask three or four people and everyone will give you some advice. I think the great thing about advice and mentorship is it's about that coming into you and then you being able to decipher and work out your own approach to it. So I just wanted to just dive in on that because I do think that some people sort of think like they must go and seek out and search and find like one single source of the truth as a mentor, and I don't think that they exist, and I don't think people have time to do like maybe in a work environment intensive mentoring, but certainly community based mentoring I think is hugely important.
yeah. I've got a link at the end to it's a site called ADP List. Um, and they are brilliant. So they are a network of free mentors who you can search by job, you can go
Wow,
and look and find people who you think might be interesting. So I volunteer, I do 2 half-hour sessions a week.
wow,
And I talk to people who want to be product managers or like want some advice with their interviewing technique. It's free and it exists, and 2 or 3 people at my workplace do it.
wow.
And it's a really good kind of speed dating opportunity because you've got no obligation to see this person again, right? You can just talk to them for 30 minutes about whatever is bothering you, and they might have something really interesting to say or they might not, and then you just don't speak to them again. But it's free.
That's
So,
amazing.
it's definitely worth the time. But yeah, I've got a link to that at the end. I will share my final tip, and I hope is particularly pertinent to people on the call because um, something I talk to people about a lot when they're changing careers is um, your authentic self is definitely marketable, and there's something really special about people who are changing careers or um, who are starting for the first time. And it's you will never be the best at the one thing that you do. So I will never be the best product manager, but I might be the best product manager who speaks entry level German, sings musical theatre, and understands how to play Dungeons and Dragons. Like, you have a bunch of skills that together make up you, and they can be a really good place to start when you're trying to get into a new organization or something. Find the things that are specific to you and see if there are career options. So let's say, like, I don't know, you used to work in I'll use my sister as an example. She studied chemistry to a really high level, and then she decided that she didn't want to go into academia around chemistry. She wanted to be a back-end developer, and so she found a company that was um, creating new drugs using using AI. So it was a kind of chemistry company, but it needed back-end developers who understood chemistry.
Yeah.
And so that was how she had her in, because she was like, well, I massively understand chemistry and I can learn the rest. So the growth mindset is I can learn. Like, she knew several languages, and she was already in a relatively good position, but it meant that she could go in and say, like, I know loads about chemistry, I will know loads about back-end development. I am a good person for you to know. And that worked out really well for her. So yeah, I would definitely lean into that. And I think, if you can do this exercise, so you know where you're trying to go, and you can stay humble and do your humble planning, I think you can put yourself in a really good position. But yeah, but those are my 3 tips. And that is the end of what I have prepared. So what I've left here is there's a link to my LinkedIn in case you want to hear more of me talking about authenticity and storytelling. There is a link to my ADP bio. You absolutely don't have to talk to me. There are lots of other more interesting people on there that might be much more pertinent to whatever field that you're looking for. But yeah, if anyone's got any questions, I'm wide open.
what do you think? One of the ones here is what do you think makes a great product or project manager in tech? Because yeah, and I can understand where that's coming from because a lot of people they do the coding course with us and they realize that they love the tech industry, but maybe not the coding element. So what skills do you think make a great product project manager?
I think one of the things that is really, really key is strong beliefs loosely held. And so what I mean by
Love
that
that saying.
is you have to care, you care very deeply, you have a direction and you understand what it is that you're trying to do. But when you get a new piece of information, you should be looking for information all the time that is contrary to what you believe, you need to be comfortable making a pivot. And that can be really, that's a hard skill. Like some people are better at it than others, but it's something you could practice. An example I'll give is that I was so I work on like an AI wine subscription. And I was absolutely convinced that my customers were using it as a discovery tool. It was a disaster if it ever included the same bottle in 2 cases running. That was a real disaster. It couldn't work like that, real problem. And so I commissioned some research to make sure that I was kind of on the right path. And we started gearing up to do some really complicated development that would look at what was in the previous case and then exclude certain bottles based on that. And we got the research back. And the research said that actually retention was higher if somebody got a bottle that was in common from their first and second case. So I was like, oh, well, never mind. And then sort of there goes 3 months of potential work, but that is good. Like you have to get into a stage where you're not like, you can't be averse to change because it's the only constant. It's the only thing that you're always going to have. So yeah, I think having this kind of agile mindset and being able to change course is very important. The other thing that I think is really important is forcing focus on yourself. So I deal very well with like 10 spinning plates, but I work with a lot of people who don't. And that means they are really, really excellent specialists. But you have, if you want your team to be productive, I can't be asking them every 10 minutes about this thought that I had that I thought was really interesting. And can you have a look at this? And can you have a look at that? And it's exhausting. So you have to force yourself into focus so that you're protecting the people around you. And that's the other kind of like core skill I would say for product managers. Yeah, you have to be good at that. Otherwise, you really destabilize your team.
I think we covered a lot of the questions during there, so I'm really sorry that I kept interrupting. There was just so
It
many
was
things
great.
coming up. It was brilliant. Thank you from everyone involved today for taking the time out to speak to us about that and show your journey. And I think, yeah, well, I really do love the wiggly slide because for me it's just you see it so much, and I really do resonate with what you said about like we try and sell that dream of everyone knows exactly where you want to be, and it is exactly that. It's the next thing that's right for you on the journey that you're on, the next right thing,
Yeah,
and that's the whole point. And I love that, and I think one of the other things as well is you went through that process about how to decide what needs to change and what you want to change and what you want to realize, but the truth is that can change, and also it's okay to sometimes not know. I think
yeah,
there's this common myth, isn't there, of just like in my mind anyway, of like everyone knows exactly, like you said, what is your 12-year-old? It's like no one knows, and that's okay too. If there's any other questions, is it okay if I drop them over and we can get back to people?
yes, of course, absolutely.
So thank you once again from everyone, and have a lovely, well, it's a weekend now.
It is. I'm
Recording
excited for
time
it. The
for
sun's out very much in my eyes, but
amazing. Speak to you
thank you
soon.
for having me. I really appreciate it. Take care.